Hello everyone, this week we will learn how to do the spring painting in watercolors. Welcome everyone, thanks for joining my home studio where I share my passion for watercolor paintings. My name is Dinesh. This week I'm excited to share with you the process of creating this spring painting. It's all about taking our time and laying down washes carefully to bring out the play of light and shadows, especially as we capture the calm presence of Willow Tree in the foreground. I'm eager to show you this approach and let us learn together. Before you go, be sure to hit the subscribe button to become a part of our learning community. By subscribing, you will receive weekly upload notifications and stay updated on our artistic journey together. Now, without further ado, let's get started, everyone. When I sketch, I always think about which is my focal point or which is the biggest shape in my reference. In this reference, the tree is the biggest element, which is in the foreground. So I'll block that first, then I'll just compare with that to other things. So the other thing you can do, other thing I personally do is I try to move things around. I try to place my bigger shapes in exactly in the golden ratios, so that way it looks nice. And the other thing, I also sketch really light, because in watercolor it's a transparent medium, so if you want to apply a wash on top of it, the lines will see through. So that's why I don't go that darker. Whereas if you think the value is going to be darker, you can also go and shade on top of it. And so the one thing that helped me in drawing is I kept drawing everything. The other thing that also helped me to draw confidently is not to worry about matching exactly close to the reference. That helped me really a lot, and this is how my sketch looks like. So now I'm going to block the sky first. So I see a little bit of purple and blue. So I was using a little bit of Cobalt Blue wash, and I'm bringing it all the way down. So there's one thing that makes me mad is like just going around the shape, because that doesn't help me to paint freely when I'm painting. But again, when I'm painting this, I sped up the video because I want to show the process instead of sitting and watching the entire clip. And so what I did is I went over the wash, and I also didn't like the wash is kind of like bleeding through near the CN tower, and I also didn't like the wash got a little bit lighter. So I'm doing another wash on top of it, because whenever I do a wash, because I'm not going to touch the sky wash again, so I'm squinting my eyes and I put a wash on top of it. And even though it looks a little bit blotchy here and there, but I'm not worried about it, because when it comes to painting, before I try to make it as smooth as possible, but now I leave my paint strokes like that, because we are painting a picture and we are not painting everything from a reference. That's why I try to change a lot of stuff in my painting. And there is also a couple of things I want to do. This kind of like a picnic scene, and there's a couple that exactly sitting in front of the bush as well as the tree. So what I did is I moved them a little bit close to the bush on the left hand side. And these are the washes, the first washes I do for the trees. I see the color, the light which is affecting the bush, and I'm just trying to throw down that color based on the wash. And when I do it, I always think about the colors in terms of warms or cools. I'm thinking like, if my color is warm, in warm colors, I usually go for yellow ochre, cadmium red, things like that, or a little bit of red in it. And if my washes are in cooler tones, I look for cool colors, and I mix cool colors in it, like blue, any kind of blue, like Cobalt Blue, French Ultramarine Blue, even Cerulean Blue. And you could see that I started with the tree now. It's the exact same thing. I slowly build up the wash from bottom to the top. And when it comes to trees, I try to mix a lot of different colors, so that's what I did. But for the darker part at the top, I'll just go for the wash and do the building first, and then I'll come back to the tree. And in the distance, you could see how bright that building is, which is on the mid part, and even it almost looks like it's white. And you can also see that this is what I said. I move my things around. I move the CN tower from the building exactly sitting on top towards a little bit of left, because that way we are kind of showing a golden ratio and we are sitting elements which are sitting on the golden ratio, like what I'm showing now in the figure in the sketch. So now I'm also seeing a little bit of this. This is like a fancy condo and it has this balconies there. I'm trying to block it really fast. And this is our first wash. So I always focus on the lighter colors first. And even if it's like a little bit darker, I go as light as possible, because in watercolors, once I go darker, I can't go back. So that's how I layered my wash in back of my head. So I'll go even lighter, it's fine. But even if I want to make the wash a little bit darker or make the value a little bit darker, I'll go and do a wash on top of it. So that way I have a control over my values a little bit better. So now once I'm happy with the first wash, what I applied on the buildings and the CN tower, now I'm jumping on to the trees. So the trees, I know that it's going to be a darker value. And you can also see the willow tree kind of like hovering on top of it. So the only way we could do this is using gouache. So I'm going to be using a little bit of gouache, or you can also use Chinese white out of the tube, because watercolors, as I said, it's a transparent medium, so it doesn't give the opaqueness on top of it. So I'm going to be using cadmium yellow and a little bit of white paint in it, a little bit of white gouache in it, and mix it and I apply on top of it. And when it comes to trees, this is how my thinking is. I always tell that let's focus on the medium shapes first, then we will focus on the little bit of small, tinier shapes, then I'll focus on really even thinner shapes. For the mid shapes, I usually use a little bit of bigger, rounder brush, and as you can see. And the other thing I will keep in mind when I'm painting trees is to see how things are coming in the front and how things are going in the back. So even though when it comes to painting trees, you have to have a lot of patience, and we have to think again, when I do it, I'm always thinking in shapes. Instead of thinking which is front or which is back, I'm thinking as a one single shape. It's kind of thinking like I'm painting a silhouette. But I'm also being aware of which trunks coming towards me and which trunks going behind me and which trunks coming to the left and right. And when I paint one trunk and I will see is there anything which is close to it, I'll just paint that. So it's the exact same thing I told about a drawing, right? So I paint one thing, one object, and try to compare with that object to another object. Being said that sometimes your tree trunks will be away from each other. Because even when you're doing painting like this, comparing it, it might be a little bit off from it. But you could see that even though there are some of the trunks are a little bit different from what I have in the reference, but still it has a really nice tree which just looks close to it. And this is what I was saying about the tertiary shapes or the thinner shapes of the trunks. And you can see I started with the bigger shape first, then I started the medium shape of the trunks. Now I'm focusing on the tinier trunks which is at the end of the trees. The other thing which also helped me simplify in back of my head when I do this is to thinking about shape of a V. So when you think about a tree, it always go to a V or Y. So whenever I think about it, that's how I simplify it. That's how I think in back of my head. So it's easy for me to simplify. And so now I finished the big shape, the medium shape, and the tertiary shapes of the trunks and trees. So now I'm going to add the shadows for this condo, which is in the midground. So again, when it comes to detailing, I put a lot of details in the foreground as much as I can. In the midground, I try to keep it minimal. In the background, I will think it's nowhere it exists because when we see this painting from far, we get to see the foreground first because we're going to create a lot of contrast in the foreground because the value is going to be darker. This color is going to be super saturated, so that's going to come in the foreground. And that's the other way we can also enhance depth as well. And even in this balconies, there's also somewhat of a little color on it, so I'm adding at the top, and it also creates this a little bit of color variation in my building as well. And this was a little bit difficult for me because there is a building, or there's a couple of buildings which is hiding on this willow tree, and which is really hard to see. So what I did is, so I was thinking, how can I simplify this? So what I did is, I was thinking in one single shape as in a rectangle. So what I did is, I made some marks and I left everything as it is. And this is what I was talking about when I was telling that I usually keep my wash really light. So that's what I did for the grass. I know the wash is a little bit darker, but I want to slowly build it up. And when it comes to green, I don't paint green as it is. I put a lot of green and yellow ochre in it, or also I'll mix green and a lot of burnt sienna in it. So that doesn't give this dark green. But in reality, it does exist, but it's super subtle. And now I'm focusing on the mid-tone values for the trees and the bushes. And again, in the beginning, as I said, I'll think in terms of warm or cool colors. If it's a warm color, I'll be using a lot of warmer tones. And if it's cool color, I'll just do that. And you could see that I'm also simplifying the shapes in the midground as well. Again, whenever I do a painting, I'm always thinking of, how can I simplify this shape, and how can I capture that light and shadow in as simplest stroke as possible? And that's where the impression comes in place. So now I'm trying to add the shadows for the tree, and since the light is kind of like a top down, and there's a couple of trees which is on the right hand side, which is not in our painting, which is affecting on the grass behind this tree. Again, I would have went a little bit darker, but I didn't do it. And there's also a couple of stairs which is on top of it. So I don't know if you can see in the reference. If you zoom in and if you see it, there's a lot of cool shadows on top of it. So I want to try to capture it. There's also other thing I try to do is, like, how can I take a shadow and apply on the light to create forms? So there is steps. So I make my shadow in such a way that, you know, the shadows are casting on stairs. So now I'm focusing on the bush in the foreground. Again, if I would have done this painting again, I would have ignored that bush. But since I painted, I kept it. And I also had a little bit of difficulty blending them with the tree, but I did try to blend as much as I can. So now adding the shadows for the people. Again, the people in the foreground, I'll focus more details on them. And the people in the midground, I'll think that I'll give them a little bit more details than the foreground people. And I'm making sure that, I'm capturing the light and shadows. And I couldn't see the light behind them, so I'm kind of assuming and applying the shadows based on what I'm thinking. Since the light is coming from top down, so I want to create that. And I also made the midground figure a little bit darker, and I'm also casting the shadow for the person in the foreground. So again, what I did is I want to create a contrast in the figure as well. So I made one figure darker and one figure lighter. So now I'm going to add the shadows for the people who are sitting on the bush, and I also created some more shadows for the tree as well. And I squint my eyes and I saw that my tree is lacking some forms. You have to think that the tree is a cylindrical form, so we have to make sure that it looks cylindrical. So I did a little bit of darker layer on the left hand side. The same thing on the top of the trunks which are facing to us, I add a little bit darker value. And now I'm adding the shadow for the CN tower and making sure to capture the lighting. And I'm also keeping it really light for the shadow as well. Again, even for the shadow, sometime I keep it really light, and if I want, I'll slowly build it up. And the same thing for the turquoise balconies, and there are some things which is facing us. So this is a mix I was talking about using yellow paint. So I'm using cadmium yellow out of the tube, and I used white gouache in it. And you could see that as soon as I apply it, it kind of created this a little bit of this willow tree which is coming in the front. And maybe there's other techniques way of doing it, applying it, but this is the way I usually do it, and it kind of works pretty nice because it brings the tree, even though it looks vibrant now, because since I'm mixing with watercolor with gouache, it's going to go a little bit lighter. And I also want to make sure this willow tree comes in the front. So again, it's the same thing what I did in the beginning. So I applied the big bushes first. Now I'm applying a thinner brush. This is like kind of like a really thin brush, and I'm applying on top of it. And the bushes are really extreme at the bottom, but I'm trying to capture this as impressionistic as possible. Because as I said, we are doing a painting, we don't have to copy exactly what it is. And you can see I'm trying to capture, put more of this willow tree in the front of the darker parts, because that gives a depth and bring things in the foreground. And one thing I realized that there's also a couple of darker the branches. I don't know, it's a branches, or I don't know what it's called. The willow tree have a couple of darker tones, and I want to add this behind it, and I'm squinting my eyes and I'm seeing where that is, and I'm applying it. So this way, again, this creates forms as well. And I'll just keep on repeating it until I'm happy with it. And I spent this video, and I did spend some time on creating this, and I'm also applied some water on top of it as well. And I'm gonna keep rubbing it till I'm happy with it. Now let's bring some details on the figures, as well as a couple of darker areas using white paint. And again, I'm trying to keep this in a minimal way, and because that's what exists in my palette, left over in my palette, so I kind of was using it. There are a few things I didn't do. I didn't add the details for the background, because details are easy to do. The washes are a little bit hard to control. So that was the important part. That's why I want to show the washes first before adding the details. And but if you see the final painting, I add the details and everything. So now it's your turn. Take this reference or use your own reference, and use the techniques what I've showed today, and let's see what you can come up with. Thanks again for watching this painting video with me. Let me know what you guys think about this video in the comment section below. If you have any other watercolor related topics you would like me to cover, reach out to me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or leave a comment down below. And be sure to hit the subscribe button. By hitting the subscribe button, you will receive weekly upload notifications and stay updated on our channel. And share with your fellow artists, friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.